Digest, your weekly breakfast of insights, tips and tricks and general information that help anyone trying to move things forward in this digital world of accounting. I am fortunate enough to be joined by Indy Tatler today, and we're going to be diving into the tangible impact of AI in accountancy firms. This episode is brought to you by FYI Docs, what was formerly purely a document management system, but with their elite plan, you can now bring it into the realms of practice management as well. But let's talk about AI. It seems to be anything, the only thing people are talking about at the moment, but a lot of it is theoretical. We had an article in our newsletter that went out a week or so ago, and then we talked about it in the latest podcast release. There were some interesting insights into how firms are actually using AI. And Indy, what do you think would be a good one to start on?
Hi, Ryan. I like hearing tips and tricks. It makes me feel very American all of a sudden. We've got the tips and tricks today.
Yeah.
I think there's a really good article. And there's some good solid use cases. Snail mail automation, which I think all of us benefit from. The use of producing more complex accounting memos. Again, if you're able to train your AI into knowing your tone of voice and knowing what kind of structure of response you like to create. I really liked the one that breaks a little bit more detail down into data analysis with AI assisted coding. And I feel like a lot of what we're trying to see right now in the market is seeing how much more time can be shaved off in the day's work by using some other methods, like in this example that he's given, using platforms like ChatGPT to generate code for tasks in Excel, and also coding out particular pieces of text and deleting rows in the Excel spreadsheet, no matter where it appears. So Tomoff in this article has described how he's asked ChatGPT to return functional Visual Basic code, and has used that to then, in his request, a larger project. He kind of describes what he's done to. In the past, he would have had to outsource that to a software engineer. I think that's a good one to start with, because then he gives a full breakdown of the type of prompt and the code that is used and the output of it. And I think it begs the question, because there was another article that I saw earlier in the week that was for a company in the US. And I know I'm doing the thing that we always say on a podcast we should never do, which is conjoining the sentence for quite some time. But really interesting. Accruals.ai raised $7.2 million. Mainly appears to be a piece of tech that's only available in the US for now. But Angela makes it 10 times faster for you and more accurate to do your accruals. And this company has come up with a series of different agents. You've got reconciliations by Rick. You've got discrepancies by Dennis. Prepaids by Preston. So I thought it was very, it's a start of things to come. And the fact that it was covered in a fintech newsletter rather than an accounting tech one. I guess that it's limited to the US at the moment, but what I thought was really insightful about it is it's not long before this will hit the UK, and their claim was that the AI agent, in particular for accruals, cuts accrual time by 90%, reducing monthly accruals processes to under 1 hour. I think that sounds very efficient. What do you think?
Impressive. Yeah, I mean, the whole AI agents thing we've been teased with, I think, in the accounting profession for a while now, because people keep talking about it and saying it's going to have a huge impact, and we're not really seeing anything yet. If we go back and look at what have we seen, well, a lot of them are the kind of co-pilots that sit inside the finance solutions, such as Xero, QuickBooks and Sage, and they're not really game changers. They can help a little bit. Some actually probably make things harder in certain areas, but overall, we've not really seen anything that moves the needle. The article that we're referring to here is from the Journal of Accountancy and is on our newsletter. So if you do want to look at any of the detail that we reference, please do just subscribe to our newsletter and you'll be able to see all the prior articles that we're talking about. We'll also touch, as Indy said, about some other things we think are coming down the line. And AI agents is a critical aspect of this. But if I dive into the Excel bit you talked about, Indy, that's something that would just help me on a day-to-day basis. I'm used to having to go to Google, going like a rough kind of trying to answer or trying to find a way to solve a problem, and it sometimes guides me down a rabbit hole that doesn't get me anywhere. But putting that stuff into like a chat GPT model and or a large language model and just saying, this is my problem, give me the code. And it literally gives you either Excel formula or Visual Basic or macros that answers it and you can just embed. That is, I think, a huge time saver for accountants trying to do a lot of data analysis, which is
100%.
generally always in Excel.
100%. It gives the prompt in the article at the bottom of the article, and it looks super simple. Just obviously it's been broken out to then so that you can insert your relevant worksheet name and your Excel table name. And they've given the Claude AI prompt. I'm pretty sure even if you don't know what the prompt is, you should just ask the GPT to tell you what is the ideal prompt to perform the mission. If you're an Excel VBA expert and you want some help creating a VBA macro that will move, not copy rows from one table to another when they've been checked. So I'm pretty again, I save a lot of these prompts as I go. I feel like, sometimes you see a new novel way of using AI and you think, yeah, that's actually really helpful to hack off hours of my day. And the other thing is, I do think that and I'm sure everyone knows this by now, that I'm quite surprised that they use ChatGPT for this. An example, it cites Claude. What's the accountant's AI of choice for performing missions?
Large language model.
Yeah.
I think it varies. I think a lot of accountants are Microsoft based, and so they start off on Microsoft Copilot because it's easy, it's in the system, and they can kind of do simple tasks with it. But I think after that, everyone's heard of ChatGPT and generally trying to go straight there. I think it's kind of awareness more than anything. But do I know what the best AI model to go to for certain scenarios is? No clue.
I often there's some pretty good examples of using Perplexity for more fact-based research. And I think there's some really interesting things if you have international teams, for an example. One of my colleagues and I were using Perplexity because we were trying to benchmark salaries in different countries with what the equivalent would be in within different sort of jurisdictions. Because sometimes when you compare staff, you can't compare apples with oranges. One of the great things about Perplexity is that it goes very, very detailed on the references of which sources it checks and how it can compare. For example, if you had a staff member in one jurisdiction at a certain salary, that you can compare with all of inflation, cost of living, and all things taken into account, what the corresponding salary would need to be in another jurisdiction to have the same kind of disposable income. And
Very
I
helpful.
asked GPT that, and it was a lot more basic. You go to Perplexity, and it will go and it will reference all sorts of other sources and give you a very detailed analysis of it. I also did a similar thing when I was trying to find a restaurant, and GPT gave me one restaurant, whereas Perplexity gave me 5 very, very well researched ideas. But again, that's like a more simple use case. I try not to use AI for every single request
It
because at
does
this
feel
point,
like you're heading down that route. What should I cook tonight?
it's also just evaluating the response it gives you, and you think brainstorming and research any day of the week for me is Perplexity.
Okay,
So if you
cool. Well,
really
that's
want to know the hard numbers, and
yeah,
usually accountants love numbers,
yeah.
for me, the research element behind Perplexity is much more comprehensive.
Cool. Well, that's definitely something to keep in mind and something I probably need to explore myself. So diving back into some of these tangible examples, another one that I thought was really interesting for accountancy firms, because it's just an absolute pain in the butt, is snail mail automation. When you're getting post in and you've just having to manually, you've got teams now that just manually scan this bit in and allocate it to the relevant people. Using AI to ingest this information, create tasks from that, automatically extracting the key words, the key labels from inside that document, whatever's been scanned, is very helpful and does streamline what would be quite a painful experience. Something where If you're using multiple team members, you can get it down to potentially one. Essentially, the way they've done this is as long as you've got someone that can scan the information in, so they open the post, scan it in, it'll automatically go into a shared area, have an image analyzer of code written, a large language model, then go through that and summarize the information and create a task. That task is then assigned to someone, depending on what I guess has been analyzed, to distribute it to the relevant team members. Now, you could automate that further and go, if it is this client or in this group, you can then send it to the relevant team member, i.e., the manager of that client, just by implement or integrating that into your practice management system. So it picks up the client name, and therefore from that picks up the manager. That's not something that this individual had done, but that would be my next step if I was looking at this. Now, they used Power Automate, obviously Microsoft-based firm to do this. But essentially, I think you could be able to use pretty much any large language model in-house to do this work. And it's something that doesn't seem too complicated to me. You need to know a little bit about AI, but it's quite a big time saver for not too much complication.
Do people still send some snail mail? Do you really?
Oh, yes. Accountancy firms do get a lot of mail still. We can't
Can
avoid
you
it.
be a paperless practice then?
Well, you just have to scan it in and then just destroy it straight away.
Great.
Yeah, you can minimize it a lot, and depending on who, like what your client base is like. But I guess if you've got a more elderly generation, then you tend to get a lot of mail still. You just can't avoid it. It's like somewhere they say they don't. I've had clients before that I don't want email. I just want you to post everything to me, and that still exists out there. So yes, it's something we can't avoid still, although it is reducing quite substantially as we go through the years.
Hmm. And there were some other examples, and I wanted to kind of get your perspective on this and whether there's any that you've seen actually live in the space. So there's a reference to audit automation and assistance on that, and they reference Trillion as one of the softwares, or the choices for how they're managing that. What other types of tech and comparatives? I mean, first off, talking about it, is it something that you think and will be something that's adopted by a lot of different accounting firms in audit? Because it's quite a prestigious part of accounting. And when I said prestigious, I also mean cumbersome, lengthy, boring. Yeah.
Boring.
So,
Wow.
what's your
Shot across the bow.
yeah.
Um, so, yeah, I mean, we'll start with the term data analytics. That's kind of what's now becoming expected inside audit processes. With that and with data analytics, they go hand in hand with AI to some extent. Now, Trillion, I believe, is a US-based system. It is a US-based article, so we'd expect that to be picked up. But in the UK, we've got similar systems that, from what I guess they're saying it does in this example, which is like search through documentation, extract information. Data Snipper would be a great example of one that's over in the UK and has a tangible impact and can have a huge positive impact of searching through documents that you get, extracting relevant information, and then bringing that into your audit file. Now, that's all using AI and automation. But you've also got advanced audit tools such as Inflow that are bringing more AI into their analytics process. And they've got to a stage now where their risk-based approach is now accepted as a recognized way of actually doing audit, which wasn't for a long period of time. You had to still do your substantive testing and your kind of additional data analytics over the top, which didn't really save any time for an audit. You can now pivot and use AI analytics to actually change the way you audit, focus entirely on risk, focus on the key areas that the documents are bringing out, the tools are bringing out, i.e. they've looked at what the high risk items are. We're not picking at random, and then we're doing our audit testing based on that. And that is something that every audit firm, in my opinion, should be moving towards if they're not already doing, because it is a better way of auditing. We are removing all subjectivity. It's a purely objective, risk-based approach, and that is something that is of benefit and improves audits.
Very nice.
Another thing I found that I guess looking at these articles that was probably more generic. Where I think more accountancy firms are going to be doing, or at least I see a lot of this, is just marketing. So where they're using AI to create either thoughts, ideas, or drafting a social media post. And I actually don't like this as an example. I
And I
find this
was
quite
just like
frustrating.
that. You can see the disgust and contempt on my face. Blah. Come on,
Yeah,
let's
it's
not be
so lazy
boring.
now, and it's too obvious to see. We've become, human brain is great at spotting trends, and we can kind of see when it's an AI created piece of marketing or post. And there's great video content out there. It's like, oh, this was fully made by AI. I can tell before you're reading it that it's made by AI. You can tell by the dynamics, the way it moves. It's still not at the part of fooling humans, in my opinion.
I don't mind the fact that it's used to assist, because sometimes it is about speed on these things. I think it's just more that give me something more useful. Give me something useful, and I don't mind. Put it through AI, fine. But if it says the word cutting edge, I will probably stop reading because that's when I go, oh God,
True.
just, I think make it real is fine. Use AI to speed it up, absolutely tick in the box. Even if you use HeyGen and create the video kind of equivalent of your face on that and saying the words, fine, all good with it. Actually, I don't mind. It's not, it doesn't drive me crazy. I just want it to be useful content. And that's all. Like, I think that's all we're asking for, is like, make it original. And usually it is the 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 5 a.m. for you probably, thought that you have, write it down. And, there is usually some merit in sharing those sorts of things, but it's very noisy at the moment. I think marketing is like, one of those things that if you really want something to be very good in marketing, it has to be an original idea. It has to be something that creates value to the people around you. And you have to, usually you've already done the hard work of building meaningful connections, and then you're just seeding that idea with meaningful connections who will then also value it, contribute to it, have dialogue with it. That is then engaging. But I think just using the AIs or any of the ones that are out there just to churn out as much.
Churn. Yeah. That's the word, right?
Yeah,
To avoid it is churn.
yeah,
I think for brainstorming is relatively positive to kind of just go, look, what is topical at the moment, to kind of get a broad breadth like of lots of different topics, like say, give me 20, and then you can kind of look at them. And then research. So going, okay, I want to dive deeper into this and pick out some key bits, key facts in this. And then I'm not sure about drafting, but if you create the kind of bare bone structure around it, refining, and Bethany Hawkins in the stream has referenced the fact that she does like draft a lot of posts and then gets AI just to, I don't know, reword it to some extent, give her some kind of tweaks that she can bring in and restructure, and make it sound of maybe a more professional tone. We can kind of put the structure around it and then get them to refine it. And people do a lot of that in not just marketing, but in email now. You've got you can have AI embedded in the email. You draft it and you go, actually, I want this in a more serious tone or a more relaxed tone. And that, I think the AI works quite well in doing that. Once again, I always want to change it to feel more me, but that can be quite positive and quite helpful. Do you use it for any email like rewording?
I do actually, but I'm quite I'm quite picky about my responses. So when it's drafted as me, most of that has come from years of writing experience that I have done in my 20s, where I used to read a lot of books around writing and writing styles. So a couple of books that I always love to stick with is Pyramid Principle, where it structures the way that you write to have a situation, a complication, a question, and an answer. So it's a really good way of setting the context out for the email and for any situation where you're not able to have dialogue. So there's that, and then there's also a creativity that comes with writing styles. So there was a couple of books that I read, like We, Me, Them, and It, and Dark Angels, John Simmons books. And again, they're all about adding a lot more creativity into the writing. So it's not just like some, bland thing that, it doesn't need to, just because it's an email, a corporate email, doesn't mean it needs to sound boring. It doesn't mean that it
Yeah.
needs to also be difficult to read. So, and then also Robert Greene, which is, his thing on laws of power. And I think that in particular emails, when you're trying to, sometimes you have an agenda. And I think it's really important to know what your agenda is. And you've got books that then are really good at setting that strategy, or they can be difficult emails. And so I think one of the things is, if you're not just using the AI, and I do this often when I'm on the move and there's only one of me, and there's like a million things to do, I just feed, I ask GPT to transcribe. Once it transcribes everything, I say, okay, and it's my words that way. It's really kind of like old school 80s dictaphone style. Um, I get the transcription and then I say, now I would like it edited in a way first where you concentrate on the structure. So for me, pyramid principle on structure. And then once it's done that, I say, now I want you to kind of feed it back through to then say, okay, we, me, them, and it, John Simmons, Dark Angel style. And again, this is not just like, this is how I would write in general.
Yeah.
And you could use any author that you like, if you really had like it's a style thing. But I did the Dark Angels course in Scotland, which I would highly recommend to everyone that enjoys writing, because I feel like it's a dying art at the moment. And then I would look at different tactics that I'm trying to employ in the email. So to me, like, I've used that to then do very specific emails where I'm in a rush and I want it to be like, again, very in keeping with Indy in the way that she speaks and the way that she communicates. I think it does really well. So yeah, all that to say, I probably use 3 different ways to make sure I train it, and then I do probably the opposite, Bethany, which is I then do the final edits at the end.
Yeah, but that's it's about finding your way, right? How to utilize AI that works effective for you. So I wouldn't draft an email and then get AI to put a Tolkien style approach in it, because no one would understand what the heck's going on. But the other thing, we use it when we're doing our podcast to dive into the articles, extract key information, and just help us kind of navigate the conversation as we're doing that. So we use it as part of digital disruptors. But I wanted to bring up one last case from this article before diving into something we're seeing coming down the line. And that was one firm is using AI to draft technical accounting memos. So this is what most firms would deem high risk, right? It's your response, it's your advice going out to clients. And the way they've done this is they have thrown or chucked all of their historic accounting memos into a large language model, got it to learn that, and then when a query comes in, they throw that query into the trained LLM, and it drafts a response. Now, there's a few issues I think that a lot of accounting firms have come across with this. One is that my gut is most accounting firms don't have any structure around the storage of their accounting memos. It's going to be in a client under different references everywhere. So trying to get them together and throw them into a large language model is going to be challenging. But secondly, I think that this does create a bit of risk. This is the advisory element, and I think you need to be very clear that you're going to have a detailed review of what is being drafted before it goes out. This is something I think we'll move more towards, but you really do need a good structure of the information you've got in your system to do this effectively. And I think that's a place where most accounting firms are going to have to focus first. I think they're not going to know where all their accounting memos are, or their advisory memos. I think this has come about because this firm had a good structure and could use this and ingest that information. But what do you think, Indy? Do you think this is a high risk strategy for where AI is at the moment?
Yeah, well, it's a tricky one because it's more about ownership, I think, is the risk. So, you know, you're training some other third party with something that's quite sensitive to you, and then the whole rest of the world is also accessing that. So I always find this bit a little bit nuanced in what it is that what you are able to do versus what you should or shouldn't do. And I think it's there's got to be a line somewhere.
Well, I guess it
Um,
depends on what model you're using, because on certain AIs, they're essentially localized. So all information you put in stays local. The training that it goes through stays local. It won't go back up into the main AI engine. But those are the paid for ones. You have to
Exactly,
make sure
that's
you're
the
on
point.
yeah,
And I
yeah,
think it's also making sure it's the right paid for one in order to have that. And it's also having a firm-wide strategy towards it as well, so people
yeah,
understand
and
the
policy.
difference.
Exactly. I think that's all critical. All right, but we've got 5 minutes, and I want to touch on something. We don't normally do this. We normally just reference an article that's already been out, but there is something that we came across our plate recently that we are going to be releasing in the podcast, and it's something that Intuit have talked about. Now, we did a live digest a few weeks ago where they'd done a bit of a teaser. They said, "Oh, we've got this AI coming out in our software," but didn't really say what or when or how that worked. They've now released a blog post on this, and what they're promising to do is pretty game changing. So, from July, they are going to be bringing in 4 AI agents into the QuickBooks products. Now, those AI agents are called an accounting agent, which is going to be focusing on keeping your books clean. It's going to have automatic categorization of transactions, detecting and resolving anomalies, and reconciling accounts, flagging what needs approval or attention from you or the accountant. So this is for businesses that it's going to be focusing on. And essentially, it's looking at month close, right? It's looking at automating month close, making sure that all the figures are what they should be. You've then got a payments agent, which is going to help businesses get paid faster. So it's going to be looking at monitoring the cash flow and optimizing invoicing and payment collection. So flagging your debtors, what do you need to chase, and automatically prompting you, do you need to delay payments for your suppliers because of what's going to happen from a forward cash flow perspective. Once again, pretty interesting there. It's going to have a customer agent, which is sourcing leads from your inbox. So it's ingesting information from your mailbox and then drafting personalized email responses, something we talked about already on this episode, and then tracking every customer opportunity in a sales cycle. So automatically, basically creating a bit of your CRM. And then a finance agent, which is automatically creating forecast, highlighting variances and pinpointing sources to help you stay on track to your goals. I.e., what do you need to do? What should we focus on? Which is the advisory element. Now, depending on what subscription tier you're in QuickBooks will depend on what access or how thorough these agents are going to be. But this essentially is game changing. This is eradicating period close. It is automating forecasting. It is then doing the advisory element that accountants do. This is in some way, for some accountancy firms, removing the entire relationship that they potentially have with their clients. Now, I don't think they'll get there straight away, but this is what they're aiming for, and this is quite intimidating, really, in my opinion, for accountancy firms. Like, what do you think? Do you think this is actually realistic?
I think it's great. I have to admit, if you're a tech company and you introduce something that's 10x better, and what they're
Yes.
essentially doing here, rapidly speeding up for customers how much faster they'll get paid, because it's not relying now on just catching the problem, but it's actually it's highlighting, raising this, and proactively recommending different methodologies for optimizing financing, payment collection via any number of the tools that they've got to get paid faster with Stripe, Apple Pay, PayPal, and more than 1,000 other third-party apps that they've also got available. I think the fact that you've got the ability to then identify, prioritize the leads from your inbox, draft, like you said, the follow-ups, track the status, add them to your CRM so that you can manage the relationship with them more proactively. I think it's a really good way of embedding AI. And like I said at the beginning, accruals.ai is more looking at specific functions that can be done that then allow you to still maintain a much more of like the relationship element of what it is you're doing and the advisory element by just then speeding up those tasks that are like much more manual. This in essence is coming at it differently. It's saying, yeah, you can do all of that too, but we'll also make sure that you're much more proactive in how you manage the relationship with your customer. So to me, I think this is a great start. Let's see where they end. And I've been very curious about like if you're like thinking of the era of the one-man unicorn, this in effect is like making it possible to have a very small accounting headcount with a very extensive product offering.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think this, in essence, eradicates the need to outsource. You can focus on your kind of high skill, high level individuals in your firm. Dave Sedek put in the comments about, when he's doing posts or articles, he wants it to feel very him, and he feels that AI detracts from that to some extent. And I think that leads into this as well, is we need to be very careful that when we're working with QuickBooks, if we're a QuickBooks firm, we don't allow this AI to take away the human element that actually makes us different. That is essentially what has enabled us to build those trusted relationship with our clients. So that's something that when this comes down the line, and it is, there's no, it's like, we've been talking for a while about, oh, it's not really going to happen. It definitely is. It's been announced. It's happening. If QuickBooks are doing it, Xero are going to do it. Sage are definitely doing it. So we've got to see how that pans out. But
can I
look,
just
we've talked a lot.
add to that point? Okay, I love the fact that Dave picked on that, because in fact, like, the one thing I would caveat and say is all of the system is allowing you to do is just to reduce your time, your headspace on that, but serving you as maybe like a prompt or something that is, if you rely on it in a lazy way, I think, you can, with like how we said, you just put some posts into GPT and it drafts something slightly lazy. But if you use it as like a prompt or some constraint that allows you to remind you and then go, okay, it's an opportunity to connect. And I think that's what, we all should be looking for, is just the tech should be prompting us as well to use it as an opportunity to connect with the actual business case that you have in front of you, the business that is then maybe struggling to get past payments in faster. And, I think this is a good way of using the tech just to do that again. So, yeah, I would agree with you. Just, let's not be super lazy, but let's see it as like something that allows us to.
It's a tool, right? And I think
start
that's a
on.
perfect way to wrap up this week's show. We've talked about actual tangible examples you can do. We've talked about what's coming down the line, the impact that's going to have. Thank you so much for listening. And if you do want to make sure you catch future episodes, please make sure you subscribe to Digital Disruptors and tune in every Thursday morning at 9 a.m. And we'll bring any comments you have into our discussions. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.